I guess we can consider this case closed. Officers? Wait, that's not how the judicial system works. I'm not supposed to... Hey, whoa. Hey. Welcome back to another installment of Mud Court, starring yours truly, Judge Mud Pudge, where we debate some of the biggest questions in shows and television narratives. What we have brought to our attention today is the murder of one Lottie Matthews. The presumed Antler Queen was murdered down in a tunnel, and the suspect list does just keep going on and on. On one side of the court, we have someone accusing one particular suspect for reasonable evidence, and then on the other side of the court, we have said suspect defending themselves by throwing out guilt and deflecting blame to every other suspect they can think of, because that's how the judicial system was meant to work. With the help of the Mudbeards online and the Mudlove jury we have in the court with us today, we're hoping to get down to one final conclusion on the idea of who killed Lottie Matthews. And remember, if you enjoy content like this, please remember to give us a like and subscribe, because this is our last chance to really keep the show going. We do not have the funds to keep it up, and if we do not get successful with this episode, we are going to have to tap into Uthgerd's 401k, and she cannot afford any more of our tapping into. Speaking of Uthgerd, why don't you go ahead and lay down on the table what we're dealing with today?
We are gathered in the courtroom today to address the murder of a Miss Lottie Matthews. The heliotrope heroine was found dead in a Lincoln tunnel not too long ago. And while one side will represent justice for Lottie, the other side will represent the most likely candidate for her murderer. Representing the spot for the #1 murder suspect and recently released from solitary confinement to address this trial, resident soft guy, Mudlove.
Wait, hold on, I thought I was brought here to defend someone. Why am I... You said I'm the #1 suspect on the list? Hold on, what's this about?
Well put, Uthgerd.
And with that being said, let's go ahead and get started.
You seriously want me to defend myself?
We'll start on this side of the room. I was in solitary confinement. I couldn't have... Thank you, Your Honor. Yes, we're actually starting this trial here today, specifically because we are accusing Mudlove of actually being the murderer of the fandom's most arguably favorite character, Lottie Matthews. Throughout the series, we've been presented with multiple people who would have a reason to want to take Lottie down. Let's start off with the most concerning suspect I have on the list, Mudlove. Why am I up here? What have I even done to even promote this? Well, if you really must know, we actually found footage of you at the murder site. Now, are you wearing 2 jackets but a pair of tiny shorts there? What's going on? That's obviously not even me. He's not even wearing the same clothes as me. He's wearing the same clothes as my opponent. Well, my apologies, sir, but you two look like you were just picked out of the same handbasket. I mean, you look exactly alike. What do you mean? Of course we look the same. Actually, come to think of it, we all look the same. Wait, why does the jury all look like me? Actually, wait, he's got a point. We do kind of look alike. Why do we all look the same? What's going on here? That's a little bit weird. Order. I don't know if I can agree with that. He's waking up. Sorry, where was I? Do you remember what they were actually talking about? I actually really couldn't pay attention too much. I'm the one talking. Yes. Suspects. Well, let's take a look at some of these suspects then. One of the top suspects we can see on there would be Lisa. See, Lisa is a character who was introduced last season and had a very tight connection with Lottie's character. And given the circumstances of how everything had played out at Lottie's compound, it does give reason to suspect that Lisa could be the one involved with her murder. Your Honor, Lisa was shown to not want anything to do with the Yellowjackets, let alone the fact that she actually felt bad for Nat, considering that she was actually getting better before what happened. We can also see that through a conversation with Miss Quigley, the likelihood of her being a suspect at this time is pretty low. Fair point, but there also is another suspect in Jeff. See, Jeff is a character who represents a bit of comedy relief within the show, super likable and super entertaining to watch. However, you do see that there is a bit of a darker side to him and a bit of a weird way of thinking that he'll go about things with. Keep in mind the fact that he kind of instigated this entire thing and Adam's death in blackmailing Shauna. Now we cut to the current time where he is suffering with anxiety, scratching himself raw. Is it possible that the guilt and stress of having committed murder for the first time is getting to him and he's not able to hold it that well together? You can also cut back to when Shauna had ruined the deal he was trying to make with some potential clients. Did anybody notice what they were talking about? Couple this with Lottie's dad referencing,
maybe one of those nutsos pushed her down the stairs.
No. This was an accident, plain and simple. And Artie down at the station knows his foundation won't see a dime if he says otherwise. guys.
And there could be some narrative clues of a business transaction gone awry in the background. Could Jeff be at the front of this, maybe killing Lottie as an accident or on purpose in the hopes of getting the business back together or out of frustration? While Jeff has been known to push some boundaries here and there and not make the smartest of decisions, his character is not a malicious one. See, it's one thing to maybe blackmail the girls in the hopes that everything will be safe and they'll just be able to get money from one of Shauna's friends, but to actually end up being the cause of someone dying, or when it comes to protecting his family, Jeff usually steps up. The idea of him actually killing for a business is pretty low, let alone the fact that if he did, he'd probably be confessing it just a few days later, i.e. season 2. Well, okay, that brings me to my next suspect, Misty. See, Misty is a character who we know can play the game and is kind of in a game of 4D chess altogether. I've been theorizing since the beginning that Misty is playing an alternate game to what the rest of the women are. And if she isn't taking up the mantle of representing the character arc that Natalie had, and investigating and figuring out what problems the Yellowjackets could be facing in the adult timeline, then there's a chance that she's actually orchestrating it. See, now Misty is a very unlikely suspect because she has been shown through multiple seasons to be very desperate for friendship/companionship. She has also proven, just in this season alone, that her dedication and devotion to her team, the Yellowjackets, goes above all. And while yes, the character is smart enough to play this fourth dimensional game of chess you keep referencing, I think at that point your theory's becoming a little too tinfoily. Alright, you bring up a good point. We know a lot about Misty and about her character, even outside of the context of her interactions with the rest of the girls. However, a character we don't know much about is Hilary Swank's character. See, there's a new character being introduced that is heavily theorized to be one of the surviving Yellowjackets from the past. Now, if this Yellowjacket bore witness to a lot of the horrific events that took place out there, isn't it reasonable to believe that potentially the same Yellowjacket could be messing with the adult versions of the characters? First off, we don't actually know who she's playing yet. And while I'd like to argue that she wouldn't be playing one of the Yellowjackets, I'm sure whoever's editing this probably won't have it out in time for that not to be immediately dated. So instead, I'll ask you one question. Why wait 25 years to start messing with everybody? If she has been around for this long and is known for this long about what the Yellowjackets have actually been up to, then why would she wait this long to actually get involved and mess with them? 25 years is a long time to build up resentment before finally deciding to take some action. Let alone the fact that in the most recent episodes, Shauna seems to be going to her. Well, then that will bring me to my next suspect, in Walter. See, Walter is, objection, Your Honor, red herring. Alrighty, well, then I guess we'll address one of the biggest possibilities in the room, and that would be Ty. See, Ty is a character who has been bouncing back and forth between in control and out of control. The audience is constantly guessing who is actually taking the reins. We know that Dark Ty is prone to violence and the ritualistic spiritualism of the wilderness. And considering Lottie was potentially the Antler Queen, and at the very least very connected with the wilderness in a way, the odds of these two coming head to head seems inevitable. But even throwing away the context of the personality switches, cut to the biggest aspect of both versions of the character, and it's their love for Van. Both Ty and Dark Ty have deep feelings for Van. And we see throughout season 3 that Ty is constantly pushing for more sacrifices to the wilderness in the hopes of keeping Van safe. Whether one Ty is controller or the other is redundant in the fact that both want Van alive, and both seem to believe that doing some horrific things will keep their loved one safe. Cue to the conversation she had with Lottie right before Lottie had actually died. Ty had been trying to find out more information about last season and what Lottie meant by the wilderness and how it was happy with them. And Lottie gave her a response that would frustrate anybody who was falling into this belief.
I don't even remember saying that.
What the fuck you mean you don't remember?
Well, thanks for checking in, Ty.
Now, is it possible that during the time it took for Ty to set up the carriage in New York, she had gone down and actually confronted Lottie, maybe asking for a way to save Van and getting frustrated with the fact that there was no actual way to save Van, or at the very least believing that sacrificing Lottie would appease the wilderness enough to save Van's life? While Ty is obsessed with keeping Van safe, she does have an arguable alibi for where she was that night. She claimed that she was setting up the entire date. We've also seen throughout the season that she's been leaning pretty heavily into both the wilderness belief and her hedonistic side. Is it fair to think that maybe after everything she's gone through and the fact that currently her life is spiraling in all aspects, maybe she just wants to enjoy it as much as she can? She even said as such to Van when Van questioned her on the same exact subject. I think with everything happening around her, she's finally numbed herself to all the chaos and decided to flow with it. And we see the only time she actually takes agency in this chaos is when she's trying to figure out how the wilderness could potentially save Van's life. Sure, her being a murderer isn't necessarily out of the question, but this trial is specifically about the murder of Lottie Matthews. Now let's tie into the fact. We've known since the very beginning of the series that Ty is willing to do some pretty brutal stuff in order to get results. And with this newfound faith in the wilderness, isn't it fair to believe that her wants to kill people is purely just out of desperation to keep Van alive, and maybe her devotion to the wilderness would keep her from harming Lottie in the first place, believing that potentially karma could come back and the wilderness could do something worse? It's not just killing willy-nilly, and she does agree that it has to choose. Alright, well, then how about I address my next suspect here on the list, and this person has been shown to be a little aggressive towards Lottie's character as a whole. And of course I'm talking about Shauna Shipman. See, Shauna is a character who throughout the series we've seen has a bit of a wild side. And while at the beginning of both timelines we see a more tempered version of that wild side, throughout the series we see that the chaos has been coming to fruition more and more. Throughout the adult timeline, Shauna's been slowly reverting to how she acted within the wilderness. Now cut to the fact that she had gone to Lottie's compound last season in the hopes of actually helping Lottie in some way. What ended up happening was all the girls, including the ones she ended up making plans with, ended up turning on her and chasing her through the woods with a knife, reenacting the same stuff they went through in the 96 timeline. That in and of itself could be pretty triggering, but let's cut to the idea that her own daughter was out there in the woods as well, equally in danger. And while the situation did play out relatively well for all of the characters, we see in the next season that tension between Shauna and Lottie persisted. See, Lottie had came to Shauna's home in the hopes of actually finding some help from her, which, side note, why would Lottie even need to go to Shauna's home if she had a dad or resources to be able to live somewhere else? Let alone the fact that her schedule was built up. This does tie into my point, but it is important to understand why Lottie got into the circumstance that she got into. Well, we see that when Lottie was in Shauna's home, she ended up bonding with Callie pretty deeply, and Shauna seemed to be somewhat okay with it, if not just really cautious. However, that wasn't until Lottie had actually given Callie the heart-shaped necklace that has been a significant part of the show since the very beginning. See, that heart-shaped necklace could be representative of a lot of things, and each of the girls could have a different takeaway of it. But I do feel that Shauna's aggressive reaction towards Lottie giving her daughter this necklace was justified. But was it justified to keep that aggression? See, we know that during the next episode, Shauna had taken a break to go to New York and seemingly buy a cat for Jeff. I wouldn't be surprised if karma had been coincidentally hilarious and that cat had strummed right past her feet after she had killed Lottie. Maybe Shauna sort of shrugging her shoulders and thinking, well, if karma's gonna hand it to me, I might as well take it. So what, because Shauna decided to do something nice for her husband and buy him a cat, all of a sudden she's guilty of murder? Weren't you the one who made an in defense of Shauna Shipman video in the first place? But it's not just about the cat. Another interesting thing to note is the parallels between the adult and the teen timeline. Shauna has been shown to not be very subtle when it comes to bullying or messing with people or doing something seen as wrong. She also is very horrible at defending herself, usually responding in a very defensive and accusatory way. Did you notice the parallels in Shauna spitting in Mari's food and finding it offensive that somebody would even accuse her of such a thing, despite the fact that she did it in front of everybody and it was blatantly obvious? To Misty calling her out for potentially killing Lottie, and Shauna, rather than continuing the conversation and adding valid points, decided to change the subject. I think deflecting and being defensive is pretty indicative of the idea that she could be guilty for something. And what could she be guilty for if not murdering Lottie Matthews? Walter had even said that he found Shauna's DNA at the site of the murder. So really, Shauna's up there with one of the top suspects of those who could have killed Lottie. To compare Shauna's current behavior to when she was a postpartum teen surviving in the wilderness simply isn't fair. It also ignores the years spent back in civilization and whatever healing her family, Jeff and Callie, could have provided her. Let alone the fact that she did even say it herself.
Lottie stayed at my house, okay? She was probably covered with my DNA.
Well, that's true. You and Shauna's character both bring up a very good point. She was at Shauna's house for a while, and she could have picked up a lot of the DNA samples that Walter had ended up finding if he's not just straight up lying about it. But following the belief that he could be telling the truth, is it possible then that if it's not Shauna's DNA, it could be someone else that shares the DNA of Shauna? I reckon there's a very real possibility that Callie herself could be responsible for the murder of Lottie Matthews. See, Callie is another character whose whereabouts we have no idea of during the time of Lottie's death. We also know that Lottie and her had built up a very strong relationship throughout the series that seemed to have spawned pretty much out of nowhere. My original suspicions was that Callie was trying to get close with Lottie so she could figure out more about her mom and her past. And maybe this idea of getting along well with each other was just kind of a fake bit, just so she could get in close. And let's say that when it got to the point that Lottie was officially kicked out, Callie needed a new way to actually maintain contact and find the answers that she was looking for. I believe that this could have led to Callie eventually finding Lottie somewhere in town and having a deep conversation with her, trying to learn more about the wilderness. And that conversation could have gone one of many ways. Callie could have revealed herself and revealed that she never trusted Lottie. Callie could have been feeling betrayed by Lottie, and Lottie could have brought up some weird stuff with the wilderness that made her feel in danger. Or Lottie could have revealed some malicious intentions and Callie felt the need to defend her mom. Either way, any of these circumstances could lead to the point of Callie inadvertently or advertently pushing Lottie down the stairs. Now, I believe you guys raised some excellent points. This actually reminds me of the time I had to decide between two homeless people who were trying to fight over a Klondike bar. They kept fighting and it got really violent. Turns out it wasn't actually a Klondike bar and it was some dirt I found on the ground. Point is, when they were done fighting, I ended up making them both pay me. Uthgard, what is your problem? Are you good?
What? Yeah, sorry about that.
What's going on with you over there? Has she been taking her meds? Do we know if we... Anyways, let's go ahead and take a brief intermission and check out some of the Mud Jury's opinions and thoughts on the suspect list that we have going here. We'll go ahead and be right back. And we're back with Mud Court, here to finish off the trial of who killed Lottie Matthews. It seems to be the consensus of most of the Mud Jury online seems to be Taissa, which would render Mudlove innocent of the suspect list. Your Honor, I have one last piece of evidence that I think you're gonna want to see. I'm wondering if Lottie is taken down, older Lottie. We only see a few shots of her throughout the trailers. No, that was a theory video for the show. That was just for me, like, thinking about the new character and what could go on. That was mostly for entertainment value. Well, that does raise a few suspicions then. Where does the jury officially fall on its verdict?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you for having me. Don't think I didn't notice that, you didn't have me up first for the Yellowjackets court, considering I'm the wild man who represents the Yellowjackets, but, you know, it's fine. Don't think I did notice it, though. I noticed. Anyways, we here at the jury had a heated debate, and we decided that this Mudlove guy is in fact guilty, simply because it's weird to try to blame a teenage girl as a suspect for murder when you're probably the one that did it. Anyways, that's all we got. Well, that sounds good enough to me. It looks like we do hereby find Mudlove guilty yet again of being just a severe piece of shit.
No way, no. Anyways, thank you all for coming to join us on another episode of Mud Court. I've been your host, Judge Much Pud, and while we continue to tackle some of these severe and thought-provoking trials, we do hope that you share some of your suggestions down below. Our next trial idea will be if the supernatural actually exists, or if it's all psychological response. Go ahead and leave your thoughts down below. Once again, thank you so much for joining us down here in Mud Court. We appreciate you taking your time to watch and provide your own feedback. And remember, if you want to show your support so that Uthgard can actually afford hospice care, then you can go ahead and like, share, comment, and subscribe.
I say you give him a knife, and then you let the bailiff hunt him through the woods.
Either way, thank you all for tuning in, and remember, Judge Much Pudge knows what's best.